Good morning and welcome to the 14th International Conference of the Justice Ministers, titled No Justice Without Life, organized by the community of Sant'Egidio in conjunction with the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation and the Principality of Monaco, with the support of the EU. Before starting with our works, I would like to hand the floor over to the Ambassador of the Principality of Monaco, Anne Eastwood. Please.
Grazie mille, signor Presidente.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
I will proceed in French. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Excellences.
President, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It is an honor for me to take the floor this morning, and I would like to thank Marco Impagliazzo for inviting me. I'm here to welcome you all, to welcome all the attendants to this 14th International Congress of Justice Ministers on the abolition of the death penalty. This ethical, legal, but deeply human struggle is a struggle that embodies a universal value that forces us all to take action. For a long time now, the community of Sant'Egidio has embarked on this struggle, acting on many levels to promote the abolition of the death penalty throughout the world. The initiative that gathers us together here today is aimed at consolidating our global commitment to this end and to bring forward this struggle on all levels. To encourage and support a change in perspective, we have to listen. We have to grant our support. And the Principality of Monaco has decided to continue putting efforts in this. We believe it is the right path. Huge progress has been made. More than 2/3 of global countries have abolished the death penalty, either de facto or de jure. Over the past 4 years, 9 more countries have decided to do the same. 10 days ago, the Third Commission of the General Assembly of the UN has adopted the draft resolution on the moratorium for the abolition of the death penalty. 131 votes in favor, 125 back in 2022. It means that a global consensus has been growing. So it is important to acknowledge these victories, small or big victories, because they are the result of an awareness-raising campaign, and they are the fruit of the courage of all those that have dared to defy the cultural resistance of countries to prove that every human life is sacred. This means that the world can continue to grow, but we must not rest on our laurels, because the challenges and the threat to go back in time is always present. So there are a few countries that keep using the death penalty as an instrument of revenge, political repression, of terror. Other countries, even de facto abolitionists, have actually reinforced the instrument of the death penalty in their legal system. The number of judgments that have been passed has reached the peak in a decade. This global context made of tensions, wars, crises, is threatening to further exacerbate this trend by favoring authoritarian regimes and relegating fundamental rights to the margins, but the world is going through a terrible crisis, and for this reason, our struggle must continue. The humanitarian conflicts, the difficulties that are becoming more and more must not make us lose sight of our key goal, that is to say, to build societies based on justice, dignity, and a respect of human rights. Quite the contrary, it's precisely in such tormented times that we have to remember the abolition of the death penalty is a fundamental pillar for long-lasting peace, because when justice respects life, violence loses ground. The Principality of Monaco was one of the pioneers in the abolition of the death penalty for all crimes. And we believe, especially today, in the validity of this message. A world where justice does not kill is a world that can go beyond human passions to reaffirm that the dignity of every human being is inalienable. And this must inspire us to move forward today and tomorrow. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue on this path. Let's continue with determination of resolution. Every debate, every step forward, every country that gives up the death penalty is a victory for mankind. And I believe that your exchange of views over the next 2 days will be an important contribution to reach this goal. So I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Merci à vous, Madame Eastwood.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eastwood, for your message. That supports the organization of this conference. So, on behalf of the community of Sant'Egidio, I would like to thank all the delegations that are present here today, ministers from different countries in the world, ambassadors, delegates who came here to Rome at the invitation of the community of Sant'Egidio for their 14th International Congress of Justice Ministers, No Justice Without Life. It is a reason of great satisfaction from the community of Sant'Egidio to have you here, which we believe to be particularly valuable and precious in this yearly meeting, where institutions and different experiences are exchanging views that with a spirit of collaboration accept to address important and sensitive issues like the justice systems, the conditions of inmates, and the death penalty in general. This meeting is part of the many initiatives that the community of Sant'Egidio is promoting or handling in different regions of the world to promote the culture of peace, of life, and of dialogue, and to reaffirm every day the value, ever more important, of life itself. The right to life is, in fact, the foundation, as you all know, of every other right. First of all, the right to a dignified life in all its forms. So I would like to thank once again the Swiss government, the Principality of Monaco, and the EU for supporting us, for having supported us for years in this battle for life. Life is becoming more and more worthless in several latitudes. One of the most important challenges to rise up to is the condition of inmates that are considered to be alien to us, people we are not interested in and you don't want to look at. And this is true for the conditions of correctional facilities, characterized by deaths due to the lack of care or other problems, or even suicide, as well as for the entire process that leads to the death penalty and its implementation. The overcrowding of correctional facilities in many countries in the Western world is certainly a complex problem, unfortunately relegated to the margins of public debate and the actions of institutions But this has very little to do with the scary conditions of correctional facilities in many countries, in other areas of the world, where the value of the dignity of the individual is radically and hopelessly denied. We must not forget that the death penalty still remains in many totalitarian and democratic countries, with barbaric acts represented by the executions, for example, in Alabama, where Kenneth Smith was killed with the administration of nitrogen. It is a method that is not even allowed in a veterinary environment. So for all these reasons, dear friends, dear delegates, dear ambassadors, I would like to also welcome His Eminence Cardinal Agostino Marchetto, who knows Africa very well. He was Apostolic Nuncio there.
Del Papa in diversi paesi africani.
Ambassador of the Pope in many African countries. So I would like to welcome you all and thank you for being here, because Sant'Egidio has always promoted an egalitarian vision of the relations between Italy and Europe and the world. We think there's no difference in the value of life, despite cultures that are different and traditions that are different. Life has always extremely valuable. There's nothing more valuable than it. So our battle against the death penalty is actually embodying this message. Life is worth more and more. It doesn't really matter what kind of life, where this is lived, richer or poorer. For this reason, I will officially kick off the works of this International Congress with a certain emotion and with gratitude, with the work that the organizing committee has done throughout the past year. And I would like to thank all those who have worked every day for this, and that every day work to reaffirm this principle of life. And I will hand the floor over to Mario Marazziti to his introductory speech, coordinator of the campaign for the abolition of the death penalty, who's a member of the community of Sant'Egidio, has been a member since its inception, is a journalist, he was an MP of the Italian Parliament, president of the Social Affairs Committee of the Lower House of Parliament, and coordinator of the campaign of the Community for a Moratorium on the Executions of Death Penalty, and one of the founders of the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty. So I think is the right person to officially kick off the meeting and introduce our works. Thank you very much, Mario.
Grazie. Thank you very much, Marco, and thank you all for being with us today. Your Excellencies, ministers, and all of you in attendance here and around the world, all of you who are watching from a distance, authorities, dear friends of the community of Sant'Egidio, members of the humanitarian and civil society organizations that for more than 20 years have been celebrating with us the 30th of November, World Day of Cities for Life, Cities Against the Death Penalty. At the beginning of this millennium, we were in the company of 58 bold cities, but they have now grown to more than 2,500 on 5 continents and form a worldwide movement. They are indeed a new player on the international stage in this great battle for human dignity without exception, for a justice that always knows how to respect human life, including the life of the guilty and of opponents, without exceptions, including the lives of those who are separated from us by religious, ethnic, political, social borders. This, and this only, can create more security in the cities of our world and in the world. Excellencies, representatives of governments, dear friends, fellow activists, we are here to take a step forward to weaken and remove from the face of the world that shortcut to the solution of all problems that societies cannot solve, the shortcut that we call the death penalty. This is a military shortcut for social problems, And I say military because it uses all the means of war, the force and the power of a state against individuals. Today, the whole world, or much of the world, seems caught up in the fascination of war, even though not a single war since the inception of the United Nations organizations has created a better world. Colonial wars have not improved the world. The two world wars, in fact, left behind a world of ruins, and even before that, and take our word as Europeans who are experts in wars, even before that they created lands full of victims with the wars of religion, the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War. Look, if we... it seemed impossible, but the European Union, even if there are those who would like to put up walls and borders again, is a dream realized, a dream come true, and the victory of peace over war. And precisely because we are experts in destruction and war, we have had enough of death. This is why the European Union has become the first continent, the first death penalty-free continent. That's Europe. This is what European moral authority is founded upon, rests upon. It does not rest upon power, but on service to all the countries of the world. So this International Conference of Ministers of Justice can espouse this moral authority, the civil passion of the encounter, of the search for possible paths together. It is the courage to build a counterculture together, in contrast to our time, which extols the I and downplays the we, emphasizes differences and reduces the possibility of being understood and living together. This is a time of individual consciousness that seems to be anesthetized, where we have lost the ability to identify with the other, with the suffering of the other, the ability to oppose the evil of war that strikes civilians above all and destroys the future of younger generations. We are reminded of this by anti-personnel mines, cluster bombs, depleted uranium ammunition. It takes 50 years to clear a territory from these devices. Now, this conference takes place in a society that has become increasingly fragmented, made up of lonely individuals and of consciences that are tarnished, resigned, afraid of the future. Fear of the other is spreading, and there are those who take advantage of it, creating scapegoats. So this international conference is indeed also a way of resisting and of preparing together the time of healing from this disease, because a society is really sick that no longer knows how to have a dialogue, all the more so in times of war, nor how to think of the other as a human being. Worlds and people are painted in black and white, and those who come from the outside are seen by too many as potential enemies and not as opportunities, because we have a narrative that presents diversity not as a wealth, an asset, but as one more reason for fear. All evil is over there, they say. All the good over here, they say. This is a society where evil is expected to be physically eradicated, where opponents are called, are described and seen as enemies, where war returns to the collective imagination as normal means of conflict resolution. If that's the case, then this world has no future. One man's war against the other man is no different. And this is often at the expense of too many women, at the expense of those who are ethnically and religiously a minority, those who speak a different language or live on the social margins of society in the no man's land, which is in the hands of the lords of drugs. There is a globalization of the merchants of death, cocaine, meth, crack, fentanyl in the United States and in Europe, Captagon in the Middle East, Kush in Sierra Leone and West Africa are weakening and destroying entire generations. Urban violence is also part of this. Think of the gang wars. Think of the search for the self in opposition. Weak egos that need to create enemies, to try to escape anonymity, to try to feel alive. We need to disarm the world and consciences together. We've been in the midst of a world war in pieces for years, and this risks becoming nuclear war, but we must also fight and work against the death penalty in pieces. It is important that the world does away with capital punishment, and it does so soon. It's urgent, as has happened already in history, at least in the laws and moral conscience of humanity for slavery and torture. Yet there is a different face of the story, a beautiful face. There were only 16 countries that had abolished the death penalty in 1976, and today we count 144 that no longer apply it, 55 that retain it in their statutes, but only 16 have actually used it or applied it in the past year. So this is a turning point in history. Yet, in a polarized and increasingly divided world, as the consensus towards capital punishment shrinks around the world, and even in those countries that apply it, the past year and this year show that more people are killing, but in fewer countries of the world. Known executions went up again from 883 to 1,153. Yet, 9 out of 10 known executions in the world take place in only 2 countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia. The rest take place in 14 other countries, China, Vietnam, North Korea. The data, the figures are not definitive. There has been a considerable fall in China. The rest take place in 14 other countries. It's not a linear path. It is contradictory. Executions in Belarus and Somalia are on the rise again, and they are back in South Sudan, where more than 100 death sentences had just been commuted after the Pope's extraordinary visit, and because of the South Sudanese people's desire for peace. In Kenya, thanks to the community Sant'Egidio's efforts for peace and national reconciliation. In contrast, a lull without executions in Myanmar and in Japan. In Pakistan, capital punishment is no longer provided for drug trafficking offenses. This is an important path that others could embark upon, not least because drug trafficking and terrorism are the two great motives for almost all executions carried out in the world. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is light in Kenya, in Liberia, in Zimbabwe. Proposals for the definitive abolition of capital punishment are being discussed in the parliaments. In Gambia, a constitutional ban on death penalty is approaching. In Zambia, and we'll hear that, the signing of the second optional protocol on civil and political rights seems to be approaching. So there is light. 125 favorable votes at the UN General Assembly on the resolution for the universal moratorium a few days ago. In the third commission, 2007, there were 98. So the community of Sant'Egidio is fully aware that the victory towards the definitive abolition of capital punishment is not afraid of a gradual approach. This is how we can approach the elimination of death penalty. Humanizing life in prisons is a good beginning, so that we don't add an unwritten penalty to the written, to the official, to the formal one. There's great news. In just a few years, the African countries have gone from 4 to 24 that have now abolished the death penalty in all cases, and 2 more for common crimes. Last year, out of 55 African Union countries, only Somalia and Egypt have carried out executions. So it is our hope that the new leadership of the African Union will make this objective an identity platform, and that it can become, Africa can become the second continent without the death penalty. This is my wish, and let's have a hand to support our wish. We are aware of that. There is resistance, there are pushbacks. In Burundi and Burkina Faso, some would like to reintroduce the death penalty, and there are many places in Africa that have no peace. But with the rejection of capital punishment, the African continent will be the chief player of the world's hope. Yes, indeed, a new protagonism of Africa can make history, one country at a time. Every country that abolishes capital punishment in Africa, in Asia, think of South Africa, becomes decisive. Think of Mozambique, and can take a piece of the moral leadership of the world. In a polarized world, every country which reaffirms the culture of life will help the world come out of this sick normality. The multipolarity of the dignity of life, again, the multipolarity of the dignity of life can indeed help the world out of this war frenzy. Think of when Cambodia, Rwanda, Burundi emerged from the desolation, the devastation, the hate of genocides with no more death penalty. They indeed broke the chain of death and revenge. Think of when South Africa emerged from the inhuman regime of apartheid without the death penalty, through reconciliation and forgiveness. One final word concerning the present time. Almost all executions in the world, I have said so, take place in response to terrorism and drug trafficking crimes. But the death penalty is not a deterrent. There is no statistic in the world that can prove this. Although this is a common argument in favor of the death penalty, it is not a terrible punishment which deters crimes. It's a certain punishment, even a mild one. And this is the extraordinary wisdom of the great Italian philosopher and jurist Cesare Beccaria, who back in the 18th century, wrote a pamphlet entitled "Of Crimes and of Punishments." The potential deterrence of the ultimate penalty becomes even more meaningless precisely when you have to combat the global drug trade and homicidal and suicidal radicalism. This is a ridiculous weapon if you want to combat organized crime and terrorism that make death its own food. Nor does it make any sense to combat the most serious crimes with the death penalty, since there is no relationship in any country in the world between the curve of extreme crime and the curve of executions. But unfortunately, the death penalty is not an instrument of justice, yet it depends on geography and on consensus. In the United States of America, over 1/2 of all executions take place in 2 states only, that's Texas and Florida. In Texas, 50% of all executions take place in only 2 counties out of its 254. Even there, if you live in one of the other 252 counties, there is, in fact, no death penalty for the same crimes. So the Innocence Project for the United States of America showed how in at least one case out of 15, for very serious crimes, there was an innocent person imprisoned or killed. 7 times out of 10, it was the wrong person, as proven by the DNA test. In 1 case out of 5, they had given confessions under torture and under psychological duress. There is no perfect judiciary system, and this is one of the reasons why we cannot ever take away what can never be returned, i.e. life. The abolition of capital punishment defends judicial systems against themselves. And let me repeat this. The death penalty is a military shortcut and a political shortcut to offer to the public a security which in fact is not there whenever social problems cannot be solved. It is the illusion of cutting off the sick limb to make the healthy body live. But that body is not healthy and it needs treating. The death penalty is a terrible use of violence at the highest level, the level of a whole state on behalf of an entire society against one individual. The death penalty does not represent the power of the state. It represents its impotence. The state that administers the death penalty replaces God, acts as though it were God, but it isn't. Human life is not at the state's disposal. Billions of people around the world know that it's against the teaching of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The pontificates of the 20th century have expressed an increasingly clear teaching of rejection of the death penalty. Pope Benedict XVI, at the end of the Synod on Africa, called on states to abolish capital punishment on that continent. With the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the sitting Pope, Pope Francis, has made available to the world a definitive awareness enshrined in unequivocal words. The death penalty is inadmissible because it attacks the inviolability and dignity of the human person, always. So today, from Rome, we're launching a new appeal to stop this devilish, this infernal mechanism also in Alabama, where the 3rd execution in history with liquid nitrogen has been carried out, leaving part of the procedure secret. A new, regressive, backwards frontier in the world's consciousness has been touched. We, again, solemnly call on President Biden to commute all death sentences on U.S. federal death row before he leaves office. We'll still remember, with great grief and sorrow, the 13 executions in 6 months, more than those that had been performed in a century and a half of American history at the end of the previous Trump administration. We don't need Congress to mark history by this small, big, brave, necessary gesture, Mr. President. At a time of strong attacks on the legitimacy of the United Nations and on the constitutions of democratic states, a justice which always invariably respects life is a curb on the culture of death. The same culture of death that takes for granted the death of civilians and children in wars. It is a levy against the simplified and generalized practice of violence. Why then abolish the death penalty with all the problems that are besetting our world? Because this is how peace begins. And we do need peace, don't we? Because the death penalty is the most extreme form of destruction of the culture of life, and because all of the weaknesses of judicial systems are concentrated around capital punishment, because it's the negation of the power of punishment to rehabilitate, to restore, because it encourages abuses against people, because it creates more and more new victims, innocent victims, the relatives of those executions, because it denies at the root the very reason why justice systems and laws exist, the reasons why law exists. The law exists, I believe, is always born, I believe, to defend society, to reduce violence, to defend life, even the lives of those who have made terrible mistakes. So a judicial system that inflicts, imparts, administers the death penalty, even if it does so with the support of public opinions, which is volatile, invariably denies itself at the root. Because it promises impossible healing to the families and friends of the victims, because in revenge there is never any healing, because it always adds one death to a death that has already occurred, because it's not the answer to the growth of widespread violence, of maras, of gangs, of the increase in planetary aggression and violence. Is a world without the death penalty a dream? I think not. I think it's realism that demands civil and political courage at a time when the collective conscience seemed to be asleep. I place this dream into your hands and our hands. We can do it. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mario Marazziti, for this in-depth introductory speech that bears witness to a long and constant work carried out by the community of Sant'Egidio and other players to humanize the condition of inmates and to improve the justice systems in many countries. We have heard about the important achievements, the most recent ones that Marazziti was telling us about, to transform many judicial systems into systems that de facto or de jure end up abolishing the death penalty, thereby enriching the world of new ways of humanity and resolution and care, as you were rightly saying, care for the body of society. And this is not something that you can definitely treat with capital punishment. Thank you very much for this presentation and for the passion whereby you are bringing forward this work for many years, and the results are visible. Well, now, it is a great pleasure to hand the floor over to the Minister of Justice of the Republic of South Africa, Thembisile Simelane. And I would like to thank her for being here. She was appointed Justice Minister and Constitutional Development on the 3rd of July 2024. Before she covered other positions in the South African government. South Africa is a de jure abolitionist country of capital punishment. And in the vote on the moratorium of the UN, South Africa has always voted in favor. So thank you. We'd like to thank South Africa for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. Let me pass my greetings, Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Africa, and Thank you very much for the hospitality one has experienced since arriving in a beautiful country to attend the 4th International Congress of Justice Ministers. My fellow colleagues from various countries, justice ministers and deputy ministers who are in attendance, but also Excellency Ambassador and Eastwood, thank you very much for making time to come to be with us. Greetings also go to Marco Impagliazzo, the chairperson of the session, and the president. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. A very good day to all of you. It is a great sense of honor, really, to represent South Africa as we gather on this 4th International Congress of Justice Ministers with a common goal of abolishing death penalty. I take this opportunity to thank the people of Sant'Egidio for the wonderful hospitality extended to me and my delegation. We can call it our second home. We are indeed thrilled to be here and to participate in this important gathering. The theme chosen for this August gathering is indeed apt as it underscores the essential message needed during these challenging times. Justice cannot exist without safeguarding lives. This gathering reinforces our duty to adopt a human rights-centered framework within our global justice systems. The South African case study highlights how our painful past was rooted in laws that were considered legitimate, but were aimed at segregation and unequal treatment within society. Justice was reserved for the selected few, and the right to life was not guaranteed for all. The transition into our constitutional democracy was indeed to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. In our transition, we sought to lay the foundation for a democratic and open society where the government reflects the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law, with the purpose of improving the quality of life of all citizens and to free the potential of each and every person equally. Our transition was the catalyst for discussion around the death penalty from a human rights perspective. Hence, our Constitutional Court, grounded on human rights approach, concluded, and I quote, "The death penalty is unconstitutional as it violates the most fundamental right, namely the right to life." Close quote. The strategy was therefore to ensure a right-based approach to all aspects of governance, and death penalty found no place in the direction that the country is heading to. Our justice system finds its legitimacy grounded on human rights, an extent to which it upholds the rule of law. The right to a fair trial is provided for in our constitutional dispensation, and an independent judiciary is central in upholding the rule of law and human rights, and ensuring a just and equitable system. It had to go to small nitty-gritties such as defining for how long can you be arrested or kept in custody prior seeing or doing your first appearance. And beyond 24 hours, the state is not allowed to keep you before you could even arrive. It then forced courts in some instances to open at night for emergency hearing, to even hear some of the cases over the weekend in extreme circumstances. But to make sure that we live with the right, that you have got access to justice and you've got to be given an opportunity to appear before a member of a judiciary to begin the trial or to hear your cause. It comes at a cost, one must appreciate that. But we need to recognize the bigger global society which we fought to build a united and a democratic South Africa that is able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. So our international cooperation is based on our priority to ensure global justice and human rights while addressing global challenges. These efforts can be seen in our interventions where war violates the sanctity of life, and we strive for justice in this respect. A message and a position we hold in all international platforms. Furthermore, we approach our extradition and mutual legal assistance framework in a way that affirms the right to life. When offense is punishable by death or any inhumane or degrading punishment under the law of the requesting state, South Africa is obliged to engage the requesting state to provide assurance that the death penalty or other inhumane or degrading punishment will not be imposed, and if imposed, will not be carried out. We have intentionally mainstreamed human rights in our criminal justice system, as we believe that rehabilitation and the prevention of repeat offending are best achieved through correction and development. And we have seen fruits in the past 30 years of such, where prisoners come out with degrees, having been educated, some having been trained in vocational and skills, the president declaring them to be able to go back into society and try and restart their lives and be reintegrated with the victim offender system as well, being part of our correctional service, where you've got to be able, where possible, to meet your victims and ask for forgiveness or face them in the eye, acknowledge the wrong you have done, so you could be reintegrated in society. So we are opposed mainly to capital punishment and cruel treatment. The rights of the accused are set out within the Constitution to ensure a fair trial. The outcome of the trial must be met with interventions that are consistent with the Constitution and that do not amount to torture, as I've already made some few examples. It does not mean the system is perfect. It does not mean that there are no cracks. There are, in some instances, repeat offenders who have, the system would have believed they've been rehabilitated, be given another chance into society, and they will also be transgressions that comes back into the system on the very same person or the offender. So the context and the fight cannot be invalidated. However, South Africa, and we believe the globe, there has been hard evidence of any deterrent effect of the death penalty on crime. The legitimacy in dispensation of justice has not been credited to the rate of the executions either. I think the fight against the struggle and apartheid in South Africa, if death penalty was a deterrent to any crime, there wouldn't have been anybody who participated in the struggle to free their country. I think it's one best example that it is the will and the collective wisdom of the people and their drive that will determine them to do either a good or a bad thing. And it's inherent in any government, therefore, to ensure that we become steadfast in developing better human beings, in growing inequalities, in minimizing inequalities and other social ills that affect communities, which ultimately results in high levels of crimes that can be best handled by the mandate and the scope of safety and social security. And there is proof that if life becomes better, even the individuals themselves are better. So social and economic inequalities continue to deprive millions of their rights to a dignified life. Governance systems must address these disparities and ensure a fair and equitable society. We're trying as a country to prioritize transformation justice initiatives that integrate socio-economic development within the legal reform system. So our abolition of the death penalty nearly 3 decades ago stands as a testament to our belief that injustice preserves life, rather takes it and it becomes better. We cannot and must not justify the incorporation in the West form of retribution, namely eye for an already inadequate toolbox. I'll quote as I close our former Chief Justice Chacalson, who said, "Death is the most extreme form of punishment to which a convicted criminal can be subjected. Its execution is final and irrevocable. It puts an end not only to the right to life itself, but to all other personal rights which have vested in the deceased under the Constitution. It leaves nothing except the memory in others of what had been and the property that passes to the deceased heirs. It is an ordinary meaning of the words. The death sentence is undoubtedly a cruel punishment." I close quote. Therefore, there is no doubt that death penalty is indeed a degrading punishment because it strips a person of their human dignity and treats them rather as an object that, owing to the disruption of social codes, should be eliminated by the state. We therefore encourage other nations to join us in adopting life-affirming approaches to justice. Justice systems must prioritize rehabilitation and restorative practices over punitive measures that undermine the sanctity of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, grazie molte per...
Thank you very much indeed for your words and for describing the community of Sant'Egidio as your second home. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for this interesting outline concerning the South African Republic's judiciary system, the restorative justice that you have described so well. I have the great pleasure of inviting to the floor the Minister of Justice of the Republic of Zambia, Madam, the Right Honorable Princess Kasune, who was elected as a member of the Zambian National Assembly almost 10 years ago, and who holds a record. She's the first Justice Minister, woman Justice Minister. We're very pleased with that. Madam Minister Kasune is also very active in her fight on HIV/AIDS in Zambia. The Republic of Zambia is de jure an abolitionist since 1922, and this year, for the first time, Zambia has voted in favor of the moratorium at the United Nations. Thank you. You have the floor.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Buongiorno. Yeah, I got it right? All right. Well, what an amazing morning, especially as I listened to Mario. I mean, how moving that was. And then I will not forget my sister that opened up earlier. And then to hear my own sister from the Republic of South Africa. This is the legacy that we must all strive for and leave behind. And indeed to the chairperson. And of course, I can't wait to hear from my brother from Malawi, as well as my brother from Mongolia. So thank you very much for having Zambia represented here. May I start by appreciating the Deputy Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Italy, Mr. Antonio Tajani, the President of the Community of Sant'Egidio, Professor Marco Impagliazzo, and the entire community of Sant'Egidio, my fellow ministers of justice from Africa, and indeed my colleagues from around the world, Your Excellencies, and the ambassadors represented here, the commissioners, what a great place to be at this time. To all the activists of the death penalty abolition represented here, the media houses, and may I simply say, invited guests, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and I know there are some Catholic priests that are also joined us here. I don't know, because I was struggling to hear the Italian translation, to hear whether he's talked about when I was nominated, like for my sister in July. I was appointed as well on the 5th of June. So indeed, we follow each other in that sense. I am delighted on behalf of the Republic of Zambia to be part of this 14th Congress of Justice Ministers, in which we are engaging to discuss progress on the abolition of the death penalty globally, in particular the moratorium of the death penalty. My fellow ministers, especially those from Africa, my fellow ministers, what a theme that we must all embody. No justice without life. Again, this is one conference that I believe that we should take a moment away from our cloudless noise, away from our phones, and just soak it in and personalize it, that there is no justice without life. And I think this is critical. Imagine if all of us in Africa in particular created this reality for our citizens. This could be the history that our names, our time as ministers of justice, we could be proud of. Imagine the legacy that you and I would leave together with our statesmen and stateswomen, wherever they are, women at the helm of their countries, that we left a world without the death penalty. I want us to soak it for a moment, to envision that world, to envision that our names and the time that we were ministers of justice, we saw it fit through our parliaments, through advocating to our leaders, our presidents, that indeed we actualized no death penalty. What a world, and that would be justice at its very core. As I begin in speaking to you this morning, may I bring the story of Zambia that will encourage some of us who haven't already made that journey become a reality. On the 24th of May, 2022, hardly a year in office, the President of the Republic of Zambia, President Hakainde Hichilema, publicly and proudly announced that the Zambian government would work with Parliament to proceed to abolish the death penalty before the end of the year, and that was 2022. If you have to appreciate, it was hardly a year and just a few months. To be precise, 1 year, 3 months for the president and the new government being in power. And yet, I wasn't a minister by then. I was a government deputy chief whip and part of the members of parliament. And so we fully participated and supported the debate in parliament that led to the abolition of the death penalty in our Zambian statutes. The Criminal Proceeding Amendment Act and the Penal Code Amendment Act number 22 and 23 of 2022, truly to his word, President Hakainde Hichilema gave the Zambian people the earliest Christmas gift of their time when he actually signed into law the abolishment of the death penalty on the 23rd of December 2022. This is not only a success for Zambia, this should be our success as Africans. This should be our success as global citizens, especially to all of us that have been given the stewardship to be justice ministers. And I deliberately use the word stewardship because we are only stewards on behalf of our people and indeed as instruments of God Almighty Himself. After the abolishment of the death penalty, there remained penalties that applied to men and women in uniform. Upon consultations with all the key stakeholders, the members of the public, and indeed the defense and security wings, once again, the members of parliament for the Republic of Zambia unanimously supported that even those in uniform, their life should not be taken away by death penalty. For there will be no justice without life. It is for this reason that the death penalty is no longer part of Zambia. The Defense Amendment Act of number 12 of 2023 and the Principal Act as well was amended by the deletion of the word death and replaced by the word as to life imprisonment where sin need be. This was not just a Christmas gift for the Zambian people, but it showed truly that our government, our country Zambia, is pro-life, and our commitment to promoting all human rights is at the center of our government. As already alluded to my other speakers, there is no basic right that each one of us should strive for and promote than the right to life. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in keeping with the theme of the Congress of Justice Ministers, a world without death penalty and no justice without life, Zambia has in principle agreed to accede to the second optional protocol without any reservations. By acceding to the second optional protocol, we are committed as a country and for the generations to come, for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-great-grandchildren, that never again in the statutes of Zambia will there ever be death penalty. Thank you very much. It is at this point that we should also appreciate the European Union for being that region without death penalty, and that should not be taken lightly. And to my all African colleagues, I long, and we should long, for an Africa without death penalty in the very nearest future. Therefore, we are in the process to ensure that this comes to fruition, especially as we look forward to attending our meeting at the UN this December. May I also particularly thank Professor Mark, as well as Dr. Ravi and Ms. Vivo, and the entire membership of ICPD for the consistent support they have rendered to Zambia and many countries. My colleagues, fellow ministers of justice, your excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, the first and foremost of our Constitution reserves and respects the human right to life. And therefore, as a country, this cannot only be something that we strive for, but this is something that our culture and our norms have to embody, and this is a legacy we must leave. Secondly, the abolishing of the death penalty is cardinal to human rights, not only for Zambia, but as a country, we are party to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, African Charter on Human Rights, People's Rights, and other human rights agreements, and we are domesticating articles of these human rights agreements, and in so doing, the death penalty is critical. As I begin to conclude, my fellow colleagues, and to all of us that are here, honorable ministers of justice from all the parts of our world, but in particular to my brothers and my sisters from Africa, your excellencies, and indeed all the distinguished guests, I stand before you today proudly to say that Zambia, being a zone free from the death penalty, and also appreciate what my sister from South Africa has just shared, we must ask if Zambia was able to do it in such a period of time, so can you, because we can. And this is a little bit personal for the president. Many of you know that he was on trumped-up charges where it was treasonable, and he was in prison for 127 years. One must say it was personal, and one must say it was the right thing to do. So, in our different countries, may we thrive together to see a world without death penalty. May we all work together to realize that the time we have been given, may we be judged well, because when our children, when our communities, when our societies ask of us, when you were just minister, what did you do? And I hope to all of us, we did what we could within our reach, and we left a world indeed without death penalty, and indeed where justice prevailed, because there is no justice without a life. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Princess Kasune, for your intervention. I tempi sono un pochino stretti perché
We don't have much time. We've got lots of people that are about to take the floor, so I would like to ask the next speakers to stick to the time allotted to them, 7-8 minutes tops. And I would like to thank them up front for cooperating for the success of this conference. Now, the floor goes to the Minister of Justice of the Republic of Malawi, His Excellency Titus Malawi, who's a lawyer. He's been a Minister of Justice in Malawi since 2020. Malawi is a de facto abolitionist country, and the last execution happened in 1992 in the vote for a universal moratorium this year. Malawi voted in favor, so we would like to thank them. I would like also to recall the importance of the presence of the community of Sant'Egidio in Malawi, especially for AIDS treatment programs, Plan, Dream and Bravo.
Very much. We're running out of time, so I'll be very brief. My name is Titus Mvalo, Minister of Justice for Malawi. Let me thank the community of Sant'Egidio for bringing us here together. I recognize the presence of the President of the community of Sant'Egidio. I recognize all honorable ministers, deputy ministers, attorneys general, all heads of delegation, all protocols observed because of time. Malawi received or took over the death penalty from our colonial masters at independence in 1964 as a punishment, in fact, as a mandatory punishment for certain offenses like treason, burning queens' shipyards, murder. When we became independent, executions continued to be carried out quite religiously of people convicted of those offenses. However, since 1992, there have been no executions, but death sentences have continued to be passed by the courts, the High Court in particular. The turning point for us was with the case of Tajani and others who were charged with capital offenses and were sentenced to death, but one of the convicts challenged the constitutionality of the death penalty in the Constitutional Court. The challenge was based on the fact that our current constitution recognizes the sanctity of life, which it guarantees as an absolute right, but it says subject to the Constitution. And the subjection is to Section 16 of the Constitution, which provides that where life has to be taken away by the state in pursuance of a court order, that is not arbitrary deprivation of life. That is what Section 16 of the Constitution says. However, the Constitutional Court held that a mandatory sentence of death is unconstitutional. And that decision was upheld by the Malawi Supreme Court of Appeal, and it just qualified, because there was a bit of a difference among judges. Some judges had understood it to mean that the death penalty is unconstitutional, and that excited everybody, both locally and internationally. But the Supreme Court clarified that what it meant was not that it was unconstitutional in whole. It said that death penalty is unconstitutional insofar as it is mandatory. And therefore, what happened is that what was declared as constitutional was the mandatory part of the penal code. So that led to an amendment of the penal code to remove the mandatoriness of the death sentence for certain offenses. And instead, now it provided that one may be sentenced to death or to life imprisonment for a capital offense. That is still the case up to now. And because of that amendment to the penal code, which made it not mandatory to pass a death sentence, there was the court ordered that there should be a resentencing of all who were sentenced to a term of imprisonment and others to life imprisonment. Was in some cases death penalty was but as I said, there have been no executions since 1992.
Scusate, c'è un problema con l'audio che va e viene, si può sistemare per favore?
Yeah, and to make it more clear, perhaps I should say that as a matter of policy, my ministry now insists that our prosecutors should never demand a death penalty. The most they can demand is life imprisonment. And recently, the president also commuted to life all sentences of death for those who are on the death row. So what I'm saying is that there's nobody in Malawi right now who can be or may be executed, because even those that were on death row who are 25 people in number, have all had their sentences commuted to life imprisonment. So, as I speak here, there is no danger of anybody being executed, constraining us at the moment is the fact that we have noticed that when we carry out consultations, that we see there's still a lot of division in our community between those in favor and those against returning the death penalty. We don't expect a consensus, that's for sure, but we think that what we've done so far in terms of the action we've taken so far of declaring the sentence of death not mandatory, and also the state no longer asking for death penalty during prosecutions, but at most life sentence, the commutation of all death sentences to life by our president is testament enough of our resolve to move away from the death penalty. I would have said more, but I'm told the time is running out. What now remains for us is simply to take the ultimate step of removing it from the statute books. That is what is remaining, to remove the death penalty from the penal code. And we think it's a matter of time. It's the death sentence as it appears in the penal code as an alternative to life imprisonment is just a scarecrow, because what is the point of having a penalty which is not being carried out? And so now we're moving towards removing it, but give us a little time, not too long from now, I'm sure. Timing is very important for us. We should do it at the right time, and we know it's not far. Sorry, I can't say more because of time. Thank you very much.
Grazie signor Ministro anche per averci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for describing to us this difficult but irreversible path towards the legal abolition of the death penalty in Malawi. And we hope so. We hope that you will succeed. And harking back to what you were saying concerning the sanctity of human life, we all express the wish that the steps you have announced are soon taken. Thank you very much indeed, and best wishes to Malawi. I will now turn this over to the Minister of Justice of Timor-Leste, the Honorable Sérgio de Jesus Fernandes da Costa Hornai. He has been in office for a few months, but an abolitionist for a long time. His country is in favor of the universal moratorium. Kindly stick to the assigned time, because we have a lot of work. His Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Italy, Mr. Antonio Tajani, Excellencies, Ambassadors, dear Ministers of Justice in attendance, Professor Marco Impagliazzo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor as Minister of Justice of Timor-Leste to be together with all the Excellencies in a great and very important event here to share our experiences and opinions concerning the elimination of the death penalty. Before becoming an independent nation, Timor-Leste had its own past history, which is full of unfavorable situations. Timor-Leste, for myself as Minister of Justice, has a great honor to be here. But before becoming an independent nation, my country had, as I said, a difficult history. The country was dealing with very unfavorable situations, but today Timor-Leste is an independent country with a rule of law. It's a democratic country where we encourage resilience for the state to be democratic and to respect the rule of law. The death penalty is a violence against human rights, and it has been for us one of the chief reasons to carry forward the important work to consolidate, to strengthen more and more our democratic state, and to assert and affirm the rights even of prison inmates. So our legislative considers this very, very important in view of the full respect of the rule of law. Our Constitution, at its article number 29, affirms that human life is inviolable and that the state recognizes and guarantees the right to life, and that there shall be no death penalty in the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. In addition, we also have other norms and statutes which assert the independence that Timor-Leste obtained in 2022. We'll shortly be celebrating the 49th year of our independence. Excellencies, we are strengthening the democratic nature of our state and to give more and more importance to human rights and the right to life. In my country, nobody is going to torture, nobody will be subject to cruel and inhuman translations. It is important for me to underscore here the respect that we have for the whole of mankind. All of this is coached and clearly expressed in our Constitution. So prohibition of the death penalty is our way to strengthen the fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens. Timor-Leste wishes to support as best it can all countries that are fighting death penalty and will abolish it. For this reason, Timor-Leste is represented here, and we wish to thank all those in attendance. We will be carrying forward the strengthening of our state system. The democratic nature of our state is already a fact. It is a bold country, and it will always be important for us to give our citizens every opportunity for social rehabilitation, so that our citizens in our country always remain democratic and to enjoy an increasingly free society. The interpreters apologize, but unfortunately the sound is not very good, And at times, we cannot understand what the minister is saying. So these were the reasons why Timor-Leste has embarked upon this path to emphasize human rights. I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention. Interpreters, again, apologize. The sound system had the problem. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for describing the facts that took place in your country, Timor-Leste. Plans for the cancellation and suppression of the death penalty have always seen the Italian government and the community of Sant'Egidio in a dialogue for cooperation. This is why I am so happy that we have the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Republic of Italy, Mr. Antonio Tajani, who I wish to thank on behalf of all participants, all the ambassadors, all the ministers, and all of us at the community. Your presence, Mr. Minister, confirms the importance that you personally, and as a political figure, as Commissioner of the European Parliament, continue to display towards the protection of the right to life and the right to peace. This year, too, Sant'Egidio has engaged in fruitful cooperation with the Republic of Italy, both at the local level and within the framework of the United Nations organizations. And I am very pleased that the minister has agreed with the Argentinian leaders to confirm the country's commitment for the moratorium. I think it's a very, very important step just at this time of which is fraught of so much conflict. I know that under your guidance, the Italian delegation has been working with great strong commitment and with the support of the coalition for the abolition. As Mario Marazziti said some time ago, the results are encouraging, and the third committee has seen the votes in favor go from 126 to 131. So over 2/3 of the membership. We are sure and confident that cooperation will forge ahead and will make it possible to consolidate these results when the resolution comes to the attention of the General Assembly in a few weeks' time. For all of these reasons, and for the friendship and the common work that we have conducted on many scores, I am particularly glad that I can now hand this over to Minister Tajani, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of the Republic of Italy. Thank you.
Grazie, caro Marco. Buongiorno.
Thank you very much, dear Marco. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio, that through Marco Impagliazzo and Mario Marazziti is engaged all over the world in the fight against the death penalty. I would like to welcome all the ministers that are attending. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation, Minister Cassis, thank you for being here. I would like to thank all the other representatives of governments, African, Asian governments that are present here today. As I was saying, I would like to thank the community of Sant'Egidio for the commitment in favor of life, because no one has the right to take one's life. It doesn't mean to, privilege laissez-faire or willing not to punish those who have committed severe crimes. It means that those who have committed crimes have to be punished, and rightly so, with the right punishment until the very last day. But precisely because punishment is actually depriving them of freedom and not of their lives, must always, as provided for by our fundamental law, the goal of rehabilitate this criminal. Even the worst criminal can be redeemed. And I would like to bring my personal experience. I recall that some time ago I participated in a big event where two inmates that were actually received a life imprisonment sentence have taken the floor. They were asking for nothing. They had to spend their whole life in prison. They were killers of the mafia, but they understood the mistakes they had made, and they were working in prison to help also the other inmates be redeemed, to regain their life, a different life, a spiritual life, even despite the fact that they had to pay with life imprisonment. I was really impressed by them, because this is proof that even the worst criminal can actually decide to make amends. So taking someone's life, as we have learned from the EU, is a mistake, is a stop to the possibility of those people to be redeemed, let alone, of course, judicial errors. Many people actually ended up not being responsible for the charges. Italy is the homeland of Cesare Beccaria, who actually designed in the first place criminal laws and regulations. So it's very important to make sure that a moratorium of capital punishment is promoted, as the incumbent government has been doing. Marco Pagliazzo has mentioned what we have done, and we are proud. We are proud of having contributed to drafting a document that was subsequently approved on the 18th of November. The resolution was eventually approved. It is a very important step forward, not only because the number of countries that are sharing our proposal for a moratorium of the death penalty has increased, but is also the success of a choice. It's not two different blocks, those who have the death penalty and those who don't. Because, well, it's not convincing to have a struggle in this regard. It is important to privilege the way of diplomacy. Especially, we have to try to convince the countries that still have the death penalty that there's no deterrent to reduce criminal activities, or to actually reduce the number of crimes. So it is important to convince them through dialogue. Dialogue is the solution to get the best results. Well, in December, the resolution will be voted at the plenary of the General Assembly, and hopefully we will succeed through dialogue. I must say that many African countries have supported this resolution. Africa is about to become the second continent in the world without the death penalty. These choices are reassuring and are further consolidating the will of the Italian government and all the European governments to look with greater attention at Africa. For us, Africa is our neighbor. We all border on the Mediterranean. We are working together to make sure that this African continent can grow. It is a rich continent, a continent where there are parts of many countries that are poor, and we have to help the African people to exploit the riches that were bestowed on them from nature or from God, for those who believe in Him. So to promote a growth of the African continent. It is a young reality, a very young reality. Population is growing. By 2050, there will be 2.5 billion people in Africa. So we are once again promoting international cooperation, as we reiterated at the G7 meeting in Pescara. We want to make sure that vaccines are manufactured in Africa and to increase the number of vaccinated people in Africa, because the protection of life must be seen in a broader context. We don't want children to live 2.5 years. I am a grandfather. If I think of my grandchildren not living long, well, this will make me feel sick. Well, unfortunately, many parents and many grandparents in Africa have to come to terms with this every day. So the protection of life must be seen as protection of young people, allowing the continent to grow, to have a better life expectancy. No one should be sentenced to death. I'm pleased that there are many representatives of African countries here. We have heard also from the enlightening, we heard enlightening words of the representative of Timor-Leste. Let's see what we can do the UN, but also through bilateral meetings, because this means making our countries grow together, making the whole world grow. It's right, there's no justice without life. Justice should definitely be guaranteed. Be against the death penalty doesn't mean to have a loose attitude, to be tolerant. It means simply to believe in a punishment that can be redeeming for people, rehabilitating for people. That is why I'm really glad to be here with you today, and I thank you for what you're doing. I would like to thank all the governments that have chosen this path. We have to move forward. We have to keep working with great determination, but also with great openness to dialogue. Meetings like this helps us enrich also our background with information and data, and putting us in a position to explain to other countries that it's not with the death penalty that we can counter crime. Those who make a mistake have to pay, of course, but this price cannot be their lives. It is even harsher on them, or harder on them, because, living with a sense of guilt all your life because you have been sentenced to life imprisonment becomes very hard. But since everyone in the world has a role to play, even those who made a mistake, even inmates may be useful, like the 2 inmates I was referring to earlier at the beginning of my contribution. So we must be optimistic and hoping that things in the world can get better, and the way to the moratorium is the path to pursue, and I would like to thank all the countries that have supported this moratorium, and hopefully at the General Assembly the number of supporters can further grow. Thank you to the community of Sant'Egidio for calling this conference, and thank you everyone for participating.
Grazie al Ministro Tajani che è qui.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. You're here also as the Vice Chairman of the Council of Ministers of the Italian Republic. Here we have representatives of 30 countries, so it's a very large gathering, and it's a sign that the topic, the theme at hand, is truly arouses the interests of more and more people, more and more countries in the world. I thank again the representative of the Italian government for the joint work of these past few years, and I'm glad and honored to say that the Swiss Confederation has always been working with us, side to side with us at this battle. It is with great pleasure that we welcome the head of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation, the Honorable Ignazio Cassis, who supports, alongside with his government, this meeting by adding their views and their experience. Thank you, Mr. Minister. You have the floor. Mr. President of the Community of Sant'Egidio, Mr. Vice Chairman of the Italian Council of Ministers, Excellencies, Ministers of Justice of countries from all continents, almost all continents, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank, as I should, the Community of Sant'Egidio for gathering year in, year out in Rome the ministers of justice and representatives of countries from the whole world to discuss the topic of the death penalty, topic that is very close to our hearts and that we are all very interested in. I wish to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your willingness to entertain dialogue. It seems trivial to say so, but an open dialogue is a cornerstone for the future, for the building of the future, for progress. In the past decade, significant progress has been achieved. We now have 113 abolitionist countries. 30 years back, there were only 55. However, the number of executions has not dropped. First of all, there's an increasingly small minority that is applying the death penalty more and more often. And secondly, progress towards its abolition is not irreversible. There have been cases of countries that went back. Last week, in 131 countries of the world, governments have expressed themselves in favor of the moratorium at the Third Commission of the General Assembly of the United Nations Organization. So it's a record number for this sort of an initiative, and we do hope the General Assembly confirms this. It was a very powerful signal that leads us, to harbor hope in our hearts. Let me tell you something about my country's position. Last summer, my ministry tabled a new action plan concerning the abolition, universal abolition of the death penalty that ranges over the next few years until 2027. This program paper summarizes the efforts of what that the Confederation has been doing in order to land new and greater momentum to this battle. But let us be honest, dear colleagues, in order to achieve this goal, in order to be more effective in our action, what is crucial, what is indispensable, is for all states to cooperate, including those that still apply the death penalty. The more we exclude them, the less they will be, the less willing will they be to change. Oftentimes, their motives are social, cultural, religious, etc. I will not dwell upon the philosophical dimensions, but we should observe that the issue is closely correlated with the issue of morality, which of course changes from country to country. In my personal conversations with my fellow, my colleagues, my fellow justice ministers, I hear that the argument that's most widespread in Switzerland, according to which the risk is that the death penalty can be applied in an arbitrary manner or in the wrong manner, I can tell you that these motives are not shared by all. So we should ask ourselves what new arguments we could bring to our defense of the abolition so that this country become persuaded that this practice should be abandoned and suppressed. Apologies from the translation booth again. The sound is very, very, it's terrible. It's so fragmented. It's next to impossible to understand. There's one tangible element. Like most abolitionist countries, Switzerland has ceased to extradite people who might be sentenced to death to countries that apply the death penalty. For instance, many drug addicts who make up 40% of the victims of the known executions. Within the framework of all crimes connected to drugs, the abolition of the death penalty would make it possible to not only strengthen international cooperation, judiciary cooperation to fight drugs, but also to more effectively combat the international traffic of drugs. So we can use this tool, the abolition of death penalty, in view of two goals. One, avoiding the death penalty itself, but also two, using the death penalty as a lever to help in the fight on drug trafficking. A complex issue indeed. Of course, there are a number of factors involved. This is just to give you an example of the creativity that we could adopt to add yet another argument in favor of those states, for the benefit of those states that still apply the death penalty. In his great work of 1764, Cesare Beccaria, who was already quoted, said that it's more important to prevent than to punish, and that irreversible punishments should never be applied by law. Beccaria, our great Cesare Beccaria, and you, Mr. President, know because you're an historian, he was the first to theorize the abolition of death penalty as a crucial, fundamental principle of modern civilization. 260 years down the road, in today's meeting, we could, I hope, take a further step on this path that was embarked upon so many years ago. Alone, we can never progress. We can only progress with the will and the persuasion that this is the right path. And I have this will and persuasion, and I want to testify to it on behalf of the Swiss Confederation. And thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie molte, signor Ministro Cassis, per averci ricordato.
Thank you very much for reminding us of the long-standing abolitionist position of Switzerland, but also for the suggestions, judicial suggestions you have come up with, and the new ideas you have shared with us that open new ways in this battle. Thank you truly, and thank you for your support. As you know, Switzerland has among its official languages also Italian, but there's another country that has Italian as its official language, so the Republic of San Marino. I had the honor this year to deliver the opening speech at the appointment of the new government in San Marino. I would like to thank the representative of the Republic of San Marino. So we'll conclude the Italian-speaking moment with their contribution. I would like also to tell you that next year there will be a summit of the Italian-speaking countries in Rome. So this is actually the epitome of the a preview of the summit that you are organizing for next year. Please, Mr. Secretary of State, thank you very much. I would like to thank Minister Tajani, honorable colleagues, ministers. I'm particularly glad to bring the contribution of the Republic of San Marino to this important international conference. And allow me to thank the community of Sant'Egidio, its founder and its president, for the invitation that has been extended to me. I would like to commend the community of Sant'Egidio on the tireless efforts that have been put in supporting marginalized countries in peacekeeping activities in the areas of conflict, stressing the importance of the contribution of human corridors, true bridges towards freedom. Animated by a deep humanitarian spirit, the community is present in welcoming the weakest in the fight for the promotion of social justice, and last but not least, the movement in favor of the abolition of the death penalty. For years, it has promoted a coalition for the abolition of the death penalty, making it one of the ultimate advocates and promoters of the right to life and the need for a universal moratorium. I would like to briefly bring my witness. The Republic of San Marino was amongst one of the first countries in the world to abolish the death penalty, and we are really proud of this. San Marino, in fact, has eliminated the death penalty, abolished the death penalty in 1848. So it has been written off its statutes in 1865. The latest execution, the last execution, is 1867. Where actually 1468 is the last execution. So it's a record. It's a record whereby we make ourselves heard internationally to consolidate the promotion of the abolition of the death penalty. The Republic has transposed all the multilateral instruments. It ratified the protocol of the UN Convention on Human Rights in 2003 and the second optional protocol on the International Pact on Civil and Human Rights in 2004, just to mention a couple. In December 2008, it gave its contribution to the historical approval of the... Sorry, the interpreter apologizes, but we are connected remotely, and connection sometimes doesn't help us. The fundamental right we are promoting is the right to life. fighting for the abolition of the death penalty from the legal systems that still envisage it. In 53 countries in the world, there's still capital punishment. As confirmed by the reports by Amnesty International, we would like to acknowledge the countries that, even if preserving this practice in the legal system, have opted for a moratorium and the suspension of the executions. And it's very well known, the campaign mounted by the community of Sant'Egidio and all the continents to reach a universal moratorium. A campaign that aims to fight against this extreme violation of the right to life. The interpreter apologizes, but once again we're having sound problems. We're encouraging the virtuous battle for life and a world with no death penalty. With the spirit and in conclusion, President, I would like to confirm the deep bond between the community of Sant'Egidio and the Republic of San Marino, confirmed once again by the well-appreciated visit to our country. And I hope that this collective commitment may grow virally, protecting the sacrosanct right to life in every human circumstance. Thank you very much for your attention.
Che per averci giustamente ricordato.
Thank you for reminding us of the role played by the community of Sant'Egidio and how the community has set an example in the world for the abolition of the death penalty. This was an historical event. The last punishment was dating back to the 1400s. Now, let's hand the floor over to the Minister of Justice from Mongolia, His Excellency Altangerél, who's Minister of Justice, has been Minister of Justice since 2014, and has been an abolitionist country de jure since 2017. And I recall we shared some time together with the community of Sant'Egidio to make sure that all this came to pass. So, Minister, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Anthony Tajani, esteemed colleagues and honored guests. As the Minister of Justice and Home Affairs of Mongolia, I am truly honored to express my heartfelt gratitude to the community of Sant'Egidio, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Italian Republic, the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of the Swiss Confederation, and the government of the Principality of Monaco for their outstanding collaboration in organizing this important event. I would also like to recognize the generous support of the European Union. It's a privilege to gather in the welcoming country of Italy for the 14th International Congress of Justice Ministers, centered around the theme of no justice without life. Mongolia's commitment to human rights and justice motivates us, shared to our experience in abolition, the death penalty today. In 2012, Mongolia made significant step by ratifying the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, demonstrating a strong commitment to abolition the death penalty. This decision reinforced our international commitment to eliminating capital punishment, which was subsequently reflected in the reformed Criminal Code 2015, officially enacted in 2017. This important milestone in our legal and human rights framework highlights our steadfast commitment to principles that safeguard human life and uphold justice. After the abolition of death penalty in Mongolia, 34 individuals previously on death row had their sentences commuted to imprisonment, a development that may saw us offering a second chance and inspiring a renewed sense of purpose. Initially granted presidential pardons with sentence of 30 years, their terms were later reduced to a maximum of 20 years under the revised criminal code, resulting in necessary adjustment. Of these individuals, 2 were released in 2017 and 1 in 2020, while the rest are currently serving their sentence in both regular and special high-security prisons. This reform strengthens our legal system, promoting a more just and compassionate society. We believe that abolishing the death penalty eliminates the irreversible risk of wrongfully executing an innocent person, serving as a crucial protection against such profound miscarriages of justice. There is a strong belief that the death penalty doesn't effectively reduce crime rates in Mongolia. We have concluded that true progress lies in prioritizing crime prevention and community empowerment. This involves focusing on raising public awareness, working in partnership with law enforcement to address various crimes and social issues, and tackling the root causes of crime through education. Through promoting community involvement and assisting victims, our goal to increase awareness of public, ultimately working to build safer and more resilient communities for all. Further, our commitment to human rights and freedoms is the foundation of Mongolian society, driving both sustainable development and progress. In line with this commitment, and as part of our broader goal to ensure equal participation in governance, expand opportunities for association, and strengthen accountability, we are preparing a set draft laws to present to State Great Hural during the 2024 autumn session. These proposed draft laws aim to protect human rights by empowering citizens to freely express their opinions, share ideas, and organize demonstrations and meetings. Additionally, they seek to strengthen a government that prioritizes respect for human rights and enforces anti-corruption measures. As we move forward with our commitment to abolishing the death penalty, we recognize that decision is a major step toward enhancing human dignity and justice in our legal system. It emphasizes our belief in rehabilitation rather than punishment, aiming for a fairer society. By working closely with international partners and engaging with our communities, we strive to make justice fair, accessible, and restorative. This shows our dedication to upholding human rights and setting a responsible example in the global conversation about capital punishment. Our journey toward a more just society requires a united effort to protect the rights and dignity of each person, ensuring that justice is not just an ideal but a reality for everyone. Thank you for attention.
Grazie. Grazie, signor Ministro.
Thank you, Minister.
Ora pregherei, approfittando della presenza del Vicepresidente Tajani.
Since we have the Vice Prime Minister, Honorable Tajani, I would like to ask the ministers to come here for a photo op. Thank you.
Thank you.
Microfono non c'è. Please, Madam Sylvie Kaytesi, Mr. Alfredois Yeboah, please. We are waiting for you on the floor.
Modeste, ma le faccio. Sì. E le bio ce l'hai tu, le bio c'hai. Togliamo il nome. Va bene. No. Carissimi amici e onorevoli ministri.
Dear friends and honorable ministers and representatives of governments, it is indeed a great pleasure to resume our work all together and to listen to yet another important representative of the abolitionist thought and culture and politics from Africa, the new Africa. Mrs. Sylvie Kaytesi, the Commissioner of the International Commission Against the Death Penalty, the ICDP.
Of Public Works and of Welfare, Secretary of State. She led the National Commission for Human Rights of Rwanda, Vice President of the Supreme Court of Rwanda, and now she is the Commissioner for the African Commission of Human Rights and Peoples, and she chairs the working group on the death penalty in Africa. You have the floor, madam, and thank you for bringing here Africa and Rwanda experience.
Thank you, Mr. President, honorable ministers of justice, distinguished delegates, representatives of non-governmental organizations, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. Let me start by thanking the organizers of this event for inviting me to this 14th International Congress of Justice Ministers to build a world without the death penalty. It is with the greatest pleasure and honor to be here representing the International Commission Against Death Penalty, ICDP, and making a statement on this important issue of the abolition of death penalty. With the end of the World War, the international community laid the foundation for the promotion and protection of human rights by proclaiming the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. While recognizing the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all human beings, the General Assembly of the United States enshrined the right to life in Article 3 of the of the Universal Declaration, which states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of a person. This declaration was thus a first and crucial step towards a steadily increasing protection of human rights, including the right to life. This same right was subsequently enhanced in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights on Article 6 and in regional instruments on human rights, such as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on Article 4, of which reiterates that every human being has the inherent right to life. No one may be arbitrarily deprived of this right. As a result of these developments, the promotion and protection of the right to life as granted in several other international instruments is no longer considered to be a matter of exclusivity within the domestic jurisdictions of a state, but a matter of international concern. Equally, of great concern is the fact that every state has to ensure that its organs respect the life of a person within its jurisdiction. It is in this context that we can now explain why, despite the fact that the death penalty has been with humanity since time immemorial, today's position is different. Research has now proved that today some countries still retain the death penalty, others have abolished the death penalty altogether, while others have in place de facto or de jure moratorium on the execution of death row prisoners. This situation called the attention of the members of the International Commission Against Death Penalty, and since it was created, all members have been active in encouraging countries to abandon the death penalty and end this cruel and inhuman practice that erodes human dignity. When the idea of a global moratorium on death penalty was presented to the United Nations for the first time in 2007 by Italy, it was my first year in the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, and the day after I started to work on the issue of death penalty as the chairperson of the working group on death penalty of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights until 2018 and member until 2021. At that time, in 2007, only 14 states, Angola, Cape Verde, Côte d'Ivoire, Djibouti, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritius, Mozambique, Namibia, Sao Tome and Principe, Rwanda, Senegal, Seychelles, and South Africa have abolished the death penalty completely. And I want to come back on Rwanda, which was the last in that year, 27, to abolish the death penalty. I was at that time the chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission for Human Rights of Rwanda. And I remember the national consultation organized by the government and led by the Minister of Justice in the whole country. And they wanted to sensitize the population on the abolition of death penalty. And after a couple of time, they arrived at the consensus to the abolition of death penalty. It was not easy because of the context, because at that time, the country had 130 prisoners accused of committing the genocide against the Tutsi. And some of them were already sentenced to death penalty. But because of the political will, the country arrived to the abolition of death penalty. During the period I said above, a member of the working group intensified advocacy for the abolition of death penalty. And in 2016, a draft protocol additional to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the abolition of death penalty was presented to the AU organs by the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, but it didn't pass. This instrument is crucial to fill the gaps of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and its support is still necessary by African states. Today, it is important to note that of 54 countries in Africa, 24 have abolished the death penalty. 30 of them retain the death penalty in the laws. Although 13 have not carried out execution in more than 10 years, despite the fact that the continent faces myriad challenges, including poverty, insecurity due to conflict, and droughts, many of which are due to climate change and the resulting mass migrations and health crisis. But the political will and the commitment of African leaders took over and has permitted this achievement. The continent's remarkable progress towards abolishing the death penalty and strengthening the respect, protection, and fulfillment of the right to life of its peoples serve as a powerful reminder that meaningful change is not only possible but within reach. The advances in Africa are not only a regional success, but a global inspiration, encouraging other nations to follow similar steps and reaffirming the reality of our shared humanity. These developments reflect a deep commitment to human rights and justice, making an encouraging abolitionist trend that serves as a powerful example for the rest of the world. The contribution of the International Commission Against the Death Penalty is very significant to achieve the common goal of the total abolition of death penalty in the world. As part of its activity, the International Commission Against the Death Penalty contributions for the abolition of death penalty goes beyond Africa through advocacy work to encourage support for the annual UN General Assembly resolution on a moratorium on the use of death penalty. By working with the co-facilitator of the 2024 UN General Assembly moratorium resolution, Italy and Argentina. Lobbying work, including discussions with the Republic of Malawi, Zambia, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea during 2023 and 2024 missions to change the votes for the 2024 resolution. ICDP engaged with the key partners in drafting the UN General Assembly moratorium resolution that passed at the Third Committee of General Assembly on 18th November with the highest number of votes, 131 votes in favor, 21 abstentions, and 36 against. The resolution will be voted at the plenary in December. As far as the biannual UN Human Rights Council resolution on the question of death penalty, a close work with focal points of Switzerland, Belgium, and the member states of the core group in 2023, including key meetings with the core group at the Swiss mission in Geneva, was done. A follow-up meeting with the permanent representatives of the United States, with Malawi and Zambia to the UN in Geneva, encouraging the support for resolution. A liaison with the Office of High Commission for Human Rights and submission of report for the Secretary General's report to the UN General Assembly on the monitoring resolution and the report on the issue of death penalty was done. As far as the second optional protocol to the ICCPR, one of our commissioner, Mark Bossut, a drafter of the second protocol, leading ICCP's initiative to encourage more countries to become state party to the second optional protocol. On 24th June 2024, ICDP held, in collaboration with Belgium, a well-attended side event commemorating the 35th anniversary of the second optional protocol on the sidelines of the 56th session of UN Human Rights Council. During the event, Mr. Muliro Kabesha, Attorney General of Zambia, made a commitment for his country to soon become a state party to the second protocol optional. ICCP's work in Zambia and Malawi. In the mission to Malawi in 2022, with the key stakeholders, members of the Commission met His Excellency President Chakwera, the Minister of Justice Mvalo, the leader of the House of Parliament, Mr. Chimwendo Banda, and key other member of Parliament. An important dialogue initiative in October-November 2023 between key members of Parliament, Attorney General, and the meetings with the Minister of Justice of Zambia and Malawi and the other key stakeholders to share good practice following abolition for the ordinary crimes by Zambia. This activity was as well important for the Commission. ICDP continues to engage in discussions with different stakeholders, including Minister Mvalo, exploring the possibility of Malawi moving away from the death penalty towards eventually abolition. We appreciate Malawi's government communicating all persons facing the death penalty. In conclusion, the ICDP seeks for a position which is consistent with the world trend on the abolition of death penalty. It is important that states adopt political and legal strategies to abolish the death penalty in the world. Among them, the ratification of the second protocol to the Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. ICDP continue to call on member states who have not yet done so to impose a moratorium on the imposition of death sentences and on executions, to commute death sentences already passed into fixed term sentences with a view to an eventual abolition of death penalty. It is in such a way that we can build a world without a death penalty. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sylvie Kaytesi. A precious work of coordination and liaison internationally, helping country by country. The ICDP is our partner. We are age-old friends. So we are helping every country to find the right path to progressively abolish the death penalty. Thank you for your work, and thank you for being here. And to conclude, I would like to hand the floor over to the last speaker of this morning, very rich morning. But we haven't heard from Ghana. So I would like to ask Fred Yaboa to come to the podium.
General Prosecutor and Minister of Justice in Ghana, e lui è anche un famoso avvocato.
He's a famous lawyer and politician from Ghana who played important roles internationally as president of the Bar Association in Ghana and one of the protagonists of the promotion of justice and social and community development in his country.
Thank you.
President of the Congress, Excellencies, good afternoon. Let me take this opportunity to put on record that Ghana stands with this particular Congress. Ghana stands with the position that death sentence should be abolished. As you may all know, Ghana has experienced a lot of military interventions. And because of that, we've taken the position for a very long time that death penalty is justified. However, having looked at the situation again, we've realized that we can live in a world without imposing death penalty. In Ghana, there are two strands of death penalties: constitutional death penalty and statutory death penalty. With respect to the constitutional death penalty, if a person is charged with treason and is convicted, the punishment for it is death. If a person is also charged with an offense under the Criminal and Other Offences Act and is convicted, the punishment is equally death. But last year, the Parliament of Ghana took a giant step by passing an act of parliament to repeal portions of the Criminal Offences Act that impose death penalty. And so in July 2023, the President of the Republic assented to that bill. And as we speak, Ghana does not impose death penalty or sentences when it comes to crimes committed under the Criminal Offences Act. But there's a catch, and the catch has to do with our Constitution. Our Constitution is a living document. Its amendment is a bit difficult. The portion relating to treason and its punishment is an entrenched provision. And so currently, there's a process underway to to amend our constitution in order to ensure that we carry that aspect, or we take out that aspect of our constitution and make it possible for Ghana to have a death penalty-free environment. In order to show that indeed Ghana is committed to this cause, 2 cases have come up in court. One of them relating to treason, in which some civilians and other military personnel came together with the intention to overthrow the government. They were tried, convicted, and sentenced, but because they were charged with treason, they were sentenced to death. But the other case, which involved offense under the Criminal Offences Act, those who were convicted were sentenced to life imprisonment. Since 1994, Ghana has not carried out any execution, even though as we speak, currently, there are over 182 inmates on death row in Ghana. The assurance that we give is that no one will be executed in Ghana because a death sentence has previously been imposed on him. By our legal setup, all those on death row will have their punishment commuted to life sentence unless other lesser terms. We stand with you. We know faith in the international community. We are a stable democracy. We believe that an eye for an eye, as Mahatma Gandhi put it, will lead to a blinded world. This is the time for us to come together. This is the time for us to forgive each other. This is the time for us to see that if a person commits an offense, punishment of death is not the ultimate thing that we must do. Thank you very much for this great opportunity.
Seeing as you've all been so good in making it possible for us to gain some precious time, I should like to use a few more minutes to invite to the floor an important country, Zimbabwe, so that its representative can, if he's at all present, to give us his contribution. He is here, and his speech is forthcoming. Zimbabwe is a country that came to be from the suppression of the racist regime of Rhodesia. And Zimbabwe was present in Rome in 1992, on the 4th of October, when the final peace agreement was signed that put an end to the war in Mozambique. So it's a special pleasure for us to greet and welcome this Zimbabwean representative.
Here for the final signature of the peace agreement in Mozambique. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will write on the protocols and want to acknowledge you, Mr. President, and the community of Sant'Egidio for organizing this event. And let me start from the outset by stating that I want to extend my delegation's warmest congratulations to you, Mr. President, and the community of Sant'Egidio for successfully organizing this Congress of Justice Ministers. Mr. President, I have been told that the time is short, so I will try to compress my presentation and indicate that Zimbabwe is a progressive nation. We share the same notion as other progressive nations around the world regarding the elimination of the death penalty as a form of punishment for capital offenses. The death penalty, as has been alluded to by others, is a cruel, inhumane, and degrading punishment that violates the right to life as enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Rights. The theme for this Congress is a world without a death penalty, and it resonates quite well with the tremendous strides that Zimbabwe has undertaken to abolish the death penalty. You may recall, Mr. President, that Zimbabwe exercises a death penalty moratorium, and despite being still part of our law, as of now, Zimbabwe has not carried out a single death execution since 2005. And buoyed by the constant support of the community of Sant'Egidio and other like-minded countries, we have accelerated our pace towards the repeal of the death penalty. And on 18 November 2024, the UN General Assembly's Third Committee adopted the resolution on moratorium against the death penalty, and I am pleased to share that my country voted in favor of the moratorium. I am also particularly very pleased to advise you that Zimbabwe has taken significant steps towards the achievement of status of a country without a death penalty. As I address this Congress today, the death penalty abolition bill is now before our Senate, and if the bill is passed, will amend Zimbabwe's Criminal Law Code and the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Act to effectively abolish the death penalty. Zimbabwe is therefore evidently pursuing a robust death penalty abolition crusade. The bill, among others, includes some clauses that will prohibit any court from imposing the death penalty. It will also empower the Supreme Court to hear an appeal against the death sentence and substitute the sentence with some other appropriate penalty. The bill also seeks to prohibit anyone from carrying out a death sentence that has previously been imposed. In addition to the above, the bill provides for the resentencing of prisoners who are currently on death row, and currently we have 48 inmates who are under the death sentence. Mr. President, majority of our lawmakers are in support of this bill, and it will bring our country in line with international best practice. We are quite hopeful as a nation that the bill will sail through Parliament and proceed for assent by the President. Thus, very soon, the death penalty might not be part of our law. My message to fellow delegates, Mr. President, is that abolition of the death penalty is a moral imperative that we can no longer ignore. Let us continue to lobby and advocate for the end of this cruel and inhumane punishment. As a collective, we can build a more just and compassionate world that values the dignity and worth of every human life. In conclusion, Mr. President, I wish to express our profound gratitude to the excellent work that the community of Sant'Egidio is doing towards the total abolition of the death penalty world over. We will certainly continue to cooperate with you. Any support towards this cause in my country will be greatly appreciated. I thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to highlight that as Zimbabwe, also Ghana voted yes at the last UNGA commission. So now we start understanding how we got to this record number of 131. Allora, vorrei concludere.
Now, I would like to conclude, without concluding actually, because so the process is still ongoing. So let's conclude this extraordinary morning of the 14th International Congress of Justice Ministers. No justice without life. Lots of food for thought, many updates, many witnesses that make us understand more and more that the death penalty is not in good health, and that it is growing smaller. Its power is being undermined all over the world. What seems very clear to me, based on what we heard from the honourable ministers and all the contributors we heard this morning, is that there's lots of progress has been made throughout the world. What seemed to be unchangeable is actually changing, and also very fast. You have told us of how your country, or some of your countries, for many years have not executed anyone, even if the death penalty is still part of your statutes and your judicial systems. Others have pointed out that the new direction taken by the country was marked by the decision of writing off the death penalty to rebuild the ability to live together after terrible times. There are different paths to eventually abolish the death penalty. Every country is different. Every journey is different. But every country has the same needs. So, in one case, the constitution of a renewed country repeals the death penalty, promoting the protection of life. In other cases, it is no longer mandatory to sentence someone to death. No more executions are carried out, and then the de facto moratorium turns into a de jure moratorium, and meanwhile the mindset changes. Meanwhile, we look at what happens in friendly countries. We start cooperating more with others, or we discover that to truly fight against certain social problems and challenges like drug trafficking, it is necessary to cooperate internationally. And it's precisely the death penalty that represents an obstacle to such cooperation and to judicial cooperation. The many things we learned this morning are actually giving us a lot to think, to counter the humongous problem of drug trafficking that is affecting the world all over. Can definitely be more effective. It can definitely be more effective to fully cooperate on a judicial level rather than maintaining the death penalty to hit, sometimes randomly, people that are considered to be responsible for that. So what I mean by this is that the world is changing. You've heard how at the UN this year, 131 countries have voted in favor. And this is before the final vote that will happen in December. I was in New York in 2007 when the first resolution for a universal moratorium was approved by the General Assembly of the UN. In the third commission, the votes were 98. So finally, well, there were 98 votes, and we finally got to 103. So for the first time, we achieved the majority of the members of the UN, half plus one. And it took us 14 years to get to that favorable vote because there were two objections that were being raised. The first one is that we couldn't talk about life and justice because it's domestic affairs. So this would mean for the UN to interfere with domestic affairs of one country. And secondly, a neo-colonialist vision of human rights was somehow imposed, the European vision. But we realized that in that occasion, the community of Sant'Egidio brought to the UN General Assembly before the vote 5 million signatures from 152 countries, leaders, ordinary people, professing different religions, bear witness to the fact that this request were a request coming from the world. It wasn't a European vision or a neo-colonialist vision. And since then, this resolution that forces no one, but is actually setting an ethical international standard. So there were 70 countries in the world that had abolished the death penalty at that time. Now it's 112. 144 are no longer resorting to it. And as we have heard, some countries are about to eliminate that by law. It is an epoch-making change because international standards can change. So any improvement in this regard will bring fruits. So I believe that there's no contrast between a gradual approach and the need for a total abolition. Quite the opposite. Starting from this morning, we have begun to hope that hopefully good news will come, other good news, that the Jubilee year that will start in Rome on the 8th of December from Rome to the world at the initiative of Pope Francis, and the Jubilee for the Christians means forgiveness. And this Jubilee has a special theme, hope. Hope. The world is in desperate need for. So maybe this Jubilee year might be marked, and we hope that, we'll insist on that, by commuting capital punishments in the federal death row in the US for President Biden and for his last and hopefully important initiative. And we also hope that it might bring important steps, decisive steps, for Africa to become soon the second continent free from the death penalty, and to make sure that the world becomes a place where the death penalty belongs to the past. We will spend time together. We will infect each other with our positive ideas, and I'm sure that next year we will receive good news.